mic on?
There it is.
Okay, good. All right. Usually I can broadcast a little bit better than that, but in any case, just on behalf of this audience, welcoming you to Hong Kong. I'm going to start off with a really tough question. I'm going to predicate that by saying this could trigger diplomatic rows, some serious backlash, okay? So just be forewarned. Your favorite hockey team?
I'm a Montreal Canadian.
Okay.
But I have to say, as a proper diplomat, I know, and you're a Leafs fan, and I have nothing but admiration for the courage and blind optimism that Leafs fans have. So good on you for having that strength of character to be a Leafs fan.
I accept that.
See, I'm a fan of evidence-based policy, as you might know, and
all right, you passed your tough test. Okay, you're good. But in all seriousness, this is a very critical time for China and for Canada itself. You're re-engaging with China after a hard-line relationship that we had with the previous administration under Stephen Harper. How are you looking to re-engage China? How is it different?
I think governments of all stripes, and historically, it's certainly true for Canada going back generations, going back a generation in my family anyway, there's been an understanding that China is important. But one of the things that has been so clear to me is what we need in terms of a strong relationship with China is a stable, predictable, deeper relationship. I think my biggest criticism of the previous generation's approach, previous government's approach, was just that it was a little hot and cold. There was a bit of unpredictability in there, and I think what we need is a constant, solid framework of engagement that allows us to build on positive opportunities and commercial interests, but also have a resilient enough engagement and dialogue that we can talk about the difficult issues, the challenges that come up, the points we disagree on, the points we should be learning from each other on. And I think that kind of frankness and stability is what's necessary for Canada and China as we move forward.
And specifically, how did you do that with this latest visit with Xi Jinping and Newtown?
Well, I was very frank that what we're looking at right now isn't just a short-term blip. We're not trying to create a great deal that'll give us a good boost right now and not really think about the future. What I think we want as Canadians, and I think, quite frankly, it matches well with what China wants, is a positive, long-term framework to engage with each other and with the world that will allow us to grow and evolve. I mean, we know that the Chinese economy is transforming right now, moving away from just being a manufacturing export economy to recognizing the economic potential of 300 million members of the global middle class who are now consumers and interested in products around the world, particularly good quality products like Canadian products, whether you're talking about lobsters or ice wine or cherries from the Okanagan. There are real opportunities to sell maple leaf branded products, more than just maple syrup, to increasingly discerning consumers in China. But at the same time, we understand that we come from very different places in terms of governance, in terms of values, and having challenging conversations in an open, responsible way is what a good relationship, a good, solid dialogue needs to have.
There's no doubt that China factors in very important to the Canadian economy. It's a very export-driven one. There is somewhat of a dependency there, and good on you to delay the canola disagreement that Canada and China has had. Did that come with caveats, though, for future engagement with trade and business interests from China in Canada?
No, there weren't conditions attached to it, but it was definitely, it became a bit of an example of, okay, here we have a specific challenge that we're facing within our relationship with different interests on each side. Are we able to tackle it together? Are we able to work things through? And I think the expectation we had, I'm really going to give a great shout out to Chrystia Freeland, who came not only armed with all the details of the canola file, but she brought a little baggie filled with canola from her father's farm in Peace River, Alberta, to make the point that these are Canadian farmers' livelihoods hinging on this, and we need to get a solution on that. So it was much more of an example of, listen, are we able to work out disagreements or concerns in a way that sets us on the right path forward? And that's why I'm pleased we were able to move forward on the canola issue.
It's a new era of engagement for China and Canada, though I believe the statistic in a 2014 poll was that only 67% of Canadians see free trade deals favorably, and of that, only 36% support free trade agreements specifically with China. They cite a number of things, including loss of control, fear of poor labor standards and environmental standards. How do you overcome the perception from your electorate, from the Canadian landscape, when it comes to China?
Well, I think the issue is even a bigger one, and you highlighted in the first statistic. There is a growing concern and anxiety about trade in the world. We're seeing it in anti-trade sentiment, protectionism, anti-globalization movements within political parties. Brexit should be characterized as an example of that. People are worried that pro-growth policies like trade are not benefiting ordinary citizens. And the danger is, if we don't start demonstrating and implementing trade agreements and outcomes that are good for the vast majority of our citizens, people are going to start withdrawing their support for trade, for pro-growth policies. And that's why one of our biggest focus on everything is the growth we're creating good for the middle class and people joining the middle class? Because if it's not going to be sustainable in the long term. And the kinds of anxieties we're seeing around the world as people are closing in are going to leave us all poorer and worse off. So the conversation we have to have isn't whether trade, we're going to have more trade and more globalization, but the world is going in that direction. The question is, how do we shape that in a way that makes people understand that this is good for our communities, it's good for our workers, it's good for the bottom line of families and the future they're hoping for their kids. And that's really the work that the governments and businesses have to do together. Great example, and I mentioned it in the speech, is the Alibaba agreement we have, where there's going to be a Canadian pavilion that will allow Canadian SMEs to access the Chinese consumer market in a much more direct fashion. When you look at small and medium businesses across Canada, that's a direct benefit to a whole bunch of people that they wouldn't have thought of maybe 10 years ago or even 1 year ago. When you think of China and trade, you think of, oh no, all those jobs we're going to lose. You don't necessarily, that was the old way of looking at it. Now you need to look at it, all those consumers we're going to be able to access.
Well, the Chinese also regard it as what kind of natural resources, what kind of stakes in Canadian companies can we buy? Very famously, in the Nexen deal in 2012, Stephen Harper said this is probably going to be the last time an SOE in China is going to be able to buy a stake in a natural resources company. Are you ready to retract that on behalf of Canada?
I think, and I was very clear around the Nexen deal, I think Canada is a country that needs to draw in foreign investment. We need to draw in global investment as a way of being able to properly develop our resources in ways that are going to create a lot of jobs in Canada. Yes, we have to think about it in terms of what are the benefits, what are the labor standards, what are the environmental impacts, and we have to analyze every deal and have a high degree of confidence that it's going to be mutually beneficial. But I don't think anyone can imagine that we would do better by closing ourselves off from the world. So what I've been doing over the past 10 months is really making a pitch to rooms like this, not always as friendly as rooms like this, to say, think about Canada as a destination for investment. We have stability, we have opportunity, we have long-term growth prospects, we have an extraordinarily capable, innovative, value-driven, hard-working workforce that's well-educated and capable of delivering. We have access to global markets. There are a lot of things when the world is sort of going in the wrong direction. Canada is excited about the opportunity to engage with the world and demonstrate one of our core values, which is that differences and diversity are a source of strength, not a source of weakness. That makes it a big positive pitch that we're looking at saying, this is good for Canadians, it's good for hardworking middle-class citizens, and it's good for all of us.
You're a new player to the G20 stage, and there has been a lot of goodwill that you have favored for Canada. What role does Canada have to play as a middle power, and how influential can you and Canada be?
Well, I think there is a sense out there, and certainly around the G20 table, as we just sat together yesterday and the day before, that there are not as many bright spots in terms of growth and openness and trade as we'd like to see around the world. There is a sense that people are starting to withdraw their support for trade, and that makes politicians a little more protectionist, and it's easier to try and, play to your voting base than say, well, if we're going to grow over the next decade, we need to be thinking about long-term investments and partnerships. So the fact that Canada can actually do this, and it's, I'm glad our government has been able to articulate that vision fairly well, but it didn't come from us. It came from Canadians who live in extraordinarily diverse communities, who understand the importance of drawing on your neighbor's strength, of looking at those family ties we have around the world as a strong potential for opportunity, for innovation, for rethinking the kind of world we want to be part of. And we've been able to pull that together and create a story of an open, exciting, creative, engaged Canada at a time where there's not necessarily that story being told around the world.
And more importantly, how do you engage that balance? Because human rights is very much near and dear to the hearts of Canadians and the global community, to many of us, in that it's part of our social heritage and it's our social roots. At the same time, you're trying to engage with China more with economic interests. How do you balance that? Is there a trade-off?
I don't know if I like the word balance, because the balance does make it sound like you're making a trade-off. You say, okay, I'm going to pull back a little bit on human rights to be able to do this. I think you have to talk fully and frankly about human rights and engage and talk about the challenges.
Did you do that in Beijing?
Yes, certainly did. I do that in private, I do that in public. It's something that, quite frankly, is part of Canada's identity and appeal to a certain sense. We are very frank about our positioning and our strength on the values that make us successful, values of openness, inclusion, creativity, different perspectives. All those things are a strength. And at the same time, we're looking forward to engaging in ways that are mutually beneficial. And I don't think you have to choose. I think you have to be very upfront and frank about doing that in a thoughtful, respectful way, but in a constructive way.
What did you raise in Beijing? How was it received?
I raised the range from consular cases to rule of law and governance and corruption. Just talked about the challenges, but also talked about the fact that Canada is not immune to criticisms on human rights either. I mean, a number of, the perspective that a lot of countries have is, well, foreign countries or foreign observers shouldn't be criticizing what are internal matters to us. And I pointed out that a few years ago, we had a United Nations rapporteur come to Canada and put out a scathing report on treatment of Indigenous peoples, of missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls, and some real challenges that we were facing. Now, the previous government didn't necessarily welcome that report in Canada, but I certainly embrace it, and since I got elected, I recognize that Canadians want us to always demand better of ourselves, and we encourage people saying, you know, we really should work on this. I don't think it means any less of us that we recognize that there is still work to do, and that was the tenor of the conversations I had with the Chinese leadership.
Well, it's very timely as well, not only G20, and for us here in Hong Kong, there was a huge election that happened just over the weekend. It's very significant in that the Hong Kong electorate voted for a lot of pro-democracy, localists, who really are starting to represent a point of view that a growing number of Hong Kong also want to express. How does Canada plan to engage with China on behalf of Hong Kong? How does Canada view Hong Kong's role here?
I'm going to use a line that I've been able to use a few times regarding our neighbors to the south. Canada will work with whoever gets elected and forms government in their foreign jurisdictions. We are consistent about our approach and values. We look forward to working with friends and allies and partners on a broad range of issues that are going to benefit our people and the citizens of countries around the world. And it is that engaged, positive approach that I think will serve us well, regardless of what happens in various elections around the world.
All right, very diplomatic.
I am Canadian.
Yeah. Showing your true national roots. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the Asia Pacific, the relationship with Japan, very important one. It's the third most important trading partner for Canada. At times it is in conflict with China, especially the South China Sea. Where do you stand in that?
Well, we had a very tremendously successful G7 in Japan in the spring, and what we were able to work on there was stronger business and person-to-person relationships with Japan. I don't think that there's any country in the world that is going to decide, oh, we have to pick and choose who we engage with. I think one of Canada's great strengths is we have positive and constructive engagements with everywhere around the world. And the way we do that needs to be anchored in our values, in international rule of law, in rights. These are the things that people expect. And if we are open, consistent, and constructive in our approach to individual countries and to the international community, then I think that's what people both expect and hope for from Canada.
And I'm going to wrap this up with a question that a lot of us get in job interviews. You already won the job, so, but 4 years from now, where is Canada's place in Asia?
Oh, I certainly expect that 4 years from now, the trade relationships will be significantly deeper. The people-to ties will be stronger. The investments that Canada is making in Asia in infrastructure, like our joining the AIIB, where we have tremendous experience in building infrastructure, and there's such a massive need for infrastructure investments across Asia. It's an exciting time for Canadian expertise, both on the technical side and on the financing side, to be part of that. I think there are an awful lot of really great potentials and relationships to build, and I look forward to coming back to Hong Kong, to China, and to Asia. Relationships between Canada and the Pacific are going to be models for how we engage with the entire world.
And I hope to introduce you to the newest Canadian coming in January.
Congratulations.